We're in Sefer Breisheet, Perek Yud Zayin. Today we're opening the next Perek. Even if you haven't joined us before, we welcome everyone, one and all. Hashem makes a Brit with Avram Avinu already in chapter 15, Perek Tedvav, and now again in Perek Yud Zayin, chapter 17. Sandwiched in between is the story we saw last time about what happens with Sarah Imenu giving Hagar to Avram Avinu, recognizing she thinks that she is not meant to be a mother, a covenantal mother of Klal Yisrael. So Perek Yud Zayin, Vayhi Avram ben Tishim Shana v'Tesha Shanim, Vayira Hashem el Avram v'Yomer Elav Ani Kel Shakai Hitalech Lefanai v'Yeh Tamim. Hashem seems to be introducing himself to Avram Avinu. Of course, they know each other very well. But the idea that we find out here in this pasuk, right at the off the bat, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, as it were, reintroducing himself to Avram Avinu, should remind us of a few things. First of all, it's not clear in all the intervening years that have transpired from the time of the birth of Yishmael, when Avram Avinu was 86, and until the time that Avram Avinu is now 99, how many times Hashem has spoken directly to Avram Avinu. I have every confidence that Avram Avinu spoke to HaKadosh Baruch Hu all the time. Avram Tikin Tfilat Shacharit. So I'm sure he's davening. The question is, what's happening with the relationship from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's vantage point, if you will, speaking with Avram Avinu? Is that happening on an ongoing basis? And the idea here that Avram Avinu sees something. Hashem appears to Avram Avinu. I see Shelley already wrote in very handily, most appreciated. Shelley wrote in about this question of how does Hashem appear to Avram Avinu? The Rambam writes in the Moreh that obviously this is exclusively a seeing something in Seichel. It's not seeing something with the eye. There's no physicality here. But there is some kind of way in which we're hearing the language that Hashem was seen by Avram Avinu, but it can't literally mean that Hashem has no body as such. Okay, that shouldn't be much of a chiddush. We had that already in Perek Yud Bet. If you look back in chapter 12, so right there in chapter 12, we have pasuk, I'm on 13, sorry. Chapter 12, pasuk Dalet, verse 4. Vayelech Avram kasher diber elav Hashem. No, wrong pasuk. Sorry about that. No, I'm getting... Here we are, pasuk Zayin. Vayira Hashem el Avram vayomer l'zarachai atenu haaretz hazot. Hashem already told Avram Avinu that the promise of Zerah and the promise of Eretz Yisrael were already given in the first line. Vayira Hashem el Avram, right away. So that's at the beginning. Vayira Hashem el Avram, but here there's more of an introduction, and the introduction of part of the Shem Hashem. Now watch what's going on here. Is that God appears to, that's not the first time that's ever happened, but here Hashem introduced himself with a new name. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has many names that reflect different attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Here, when he speaks to Avram Avinu, he teaches him a new dimension of relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is the name Kel Shakai. We'll have to understand what that means in a minute. Just to see the contrast. In Perek Yud Bet, we just looked up a minute ago, chapter 12, pasuk Zayin, verse 7. It just says Hashem appeared to Avram, and Avram hears the voice. It doesn't mean that he saw something, and Hashem didn't even introduce himself, saying this is my name, etc. Perek Tedvav, recall when Hashem appears to Avram Avinu, it says that Hashem appeared to Avram Avinu, at least in terms of Hashem speaking to Avram Avinu directly, in terms of an introduction of I am, right? So the other place is in the middle of chapter 15, verse 7. Vayomer Elav Ani Hashem. So there's the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. I am Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei. We've spoken about this many times. Chazal described this as the Midat HaRachamim, the attribute of mercy of Hashem. This is the attribute of mercy which reflects a personal relationship, as opposed to the Shem Elokim, which whenever it's used reflects what's called Midat Hadin, the attribute of justice. God who creates nature, creates immutable laws of nature. Say immutable, it's in quote, air quotes, immutable. If Hashem wanted to abrogate those laws, he could do so. He's God. He made it up, not limited. So that's Breisheet bara Elokim Hashemayim v'ha'aretz. on the international scene, if you will, universal role of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, such as it is B'Shem Elokim. And if you look at Parshat Noach, you see that's still playing very heavily. But a personal relationship, an individual with a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's Hashem involved in history, particularly the covenantal history of Klal Yisrael. Now, one of the elements here, therefore, is redoubled. It says in Parakid, back in Parakid Zayin, Pasuk Aleph, Avram, it tells you, wants you to know his age right off the bat. Why is that important? And then, Vayira Hashem el Avram, we have that language previously. But whereas in the covenant, known as covenant between the parts, Brit and Bitarim, Hashem says that I am Hashem who took you out of Ur Kasdim. We talked about that extensively. What does that mean? When did Hashem say it? And the like. Here, Hashem, who is already known to Avram Avinu from much earlier in his life, from when he's a septuagenarian. Now he is a nonagenarian, I guess is the word. Now Avram Avinu hears from Hashem a new name. But it's the same Hashem, Vayira Hashem el Avram. But he told him, Ani kel shakai. Now you have to understand the question before we get to even what some of us erroneously sometimes conclude the simplest of all the Parshanei HaMikra, Rashi. He's not the simplest. He's the most trenchant, and therefore he has the most information packed in, but so part of his brilliance was in the trenchancy, could concatenate grand ideas into very, very few words. So if you have Rashi in front of you, you'll see that's what Rashi's responding to. Why did Hashem have to introduce another name to Avram Avinu they hadn't heard before? Okay, Hashem knew that I'm Hashem, Ani Hashem. Why not Ani Kel Shakai? Ani hu sheyesh dai be'elokuti l'kol bria. Lefichach hitalech lefanai ve'yelecha le'eloa u'lepitaron. V'chein kol makom shubemikra perush kach dai shelo v'akol lefi ha'inyan. Here Rashi wants us to understand, that all the Rishonim are trying to understand, what does this name of Hashem refer to? The Kel part, we've had that before. Kel, Hashem referred to as Kel Elyon, Konei Shamayim Va'aretz. That's in Parak Yudal, chapter 14. Kel refers to the power of Hashem, etc. But here, in or the omnipotent is Kel, right? That here, the name Shakai reflects something else. Right? The idea that the first point of Rashi is you should just be aware that my divinity is such that I can have a personal relationship with every individual. I remember Moiv Avram Lichtenstein, he would ask this question sort of rhetorically. If someone would marvel at something having to do with the providence of God, the providential capability of Hashem, as he said, something along the lines of, I guess it depends how great a God you envision, right? If you've reduced HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lo Aleinu to some kind of massive supercomputer, to use today's analogy, in the 19th century it said to some massive machine, so that's a failed analogy because it's limited, because it's not true, it's not accurate. So Ani Kel Shakai, and because I have, as it were, the relationship with every individual. So now you walk before me and be whole. What does the walking before me reflect? That I expect that you are going to be in a certain way, what's the word? I will be your God, but you walk before me, meaning I have a relationship with every individual who is here in this story, in this world. And the idea of what's coming next, everyone knows this Brit, this covenant will be called Brit Mila, but until we get to Avram doesn't know what it's going to be called. He doesn't even know it's going to be a Brit. 13 years after Yishmael is born, he hears from Hashem. And, the idea of hitalech lefanai is itself a question for Rashi. It's to daven. It's to cleave to Hashem. You're connected to me. Hitalech lefanai means you're connected to me. Not everyone agreed. The Malbim thinks that hitalech lefanai reflects the idea that, in fact, you are my partner in creation, Hashem is saying to Avram Avinu. And you have to complete everything and fix it. And the first thing you need to do, Reishit Ma'asecha ve'yeh tamim. The first thing to do is be whole before me. Now, what Avram Avinu doesn't yet know, we already know, is to be whole in this case means to remove the foreskin, to remove the extra element. that which is extraneous. Now, what the Malbim has an essay which can best be, elucidated by his quotation of the Medrash in Parsha Tazria, the Medrash Tanchuma, that many of us are familiar with, and it's, I guess, a little bit apropos the time that we're in. Rabbi Akiva was involved, unfortunately, as many of the Tanaim and the Amoraim and the Geonim, but especially the Rishonim and some of the Achronim, were stuck having to engage in polemics to defend the Torah, to defend the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world against people who had it in for the Jews. Rabbi Akiva's interlocutor was Turnus Rufus. I won't spend too much time on the history. Turnus Rufus, Roman. And Turnus Rufus was a representative of a Roman worldview, which was in certain ways born out of a Greek worldview. They say about the Romans that while they did conquer the Greeks, ultimately the Greeks conquered the Romans, because the culture of the Greeks was simply adapted into the culture of the Romans. So the Greeks had an opposition, because they believed in aesthetics and like that, in opposition to Brit Mila. They felt that the human form was perfect as it was. The Romans picked up the same idea in many respects. Here, Turnus Rufus asks Rabbi Akiva how it could be that God, who is perfect, created the world, would have created a human being with the need for Brit Milah, for Jewish boys to have the Brit Milah done. So Rabbi Akiva's claim to Turnus Rufus is that actually the acts of a human being are actually nicer for Hashem than Hashem's own actions. He dafka made the world incomplete. And to prove his point, Rabbi Akiva tells Turnus Rufus to bring him a bag of flour and a loaf of bread. And he asks him which one did Hashem make and which one was transformed by human beings. The Kadosh Baruch Hu invites us to do this. That's exactly the point. And that's part of our role in the world. This is, by the way, some of the Mefarshim explain in the words at the end of Masa Breisheet that we recite in Kiddush, Asher bara Elokim la'asot, which Hashem created to make. So the way that ends, that pasuk ends, some Mefarshim read as that we are now bidden to go ahead and try to even improve. It's Hashem Kadosh Baruch Hu inviting us for this. Now, where does the Malbim come up with this idea that that's what's going on here? So there's a machloket between different Parshanei Mikra. What is the Shem Shakai? What does it mean? What does it represent? Shakai is one of the names of God. So just like the Shem Havaya, the Shem Elokim, we don't actually pronounce it as such. Instead, we say Shakai with a kuf. It's considered one of the Shemot with Kedusha. So the idea here of Kel Shakai refers to the Gemara Masechet Chagiga that a Kadosh Baruch Hu she'amar le'olamo dai. God said to his world, it's enough. Stop. Now, there's various interpretations of what that means. Shakai, Shin, then a Dalet and a Yud. That's she'amar le'olamo dai. It's a notrikon, it's an acronym. Okay, a lot of acronyms in chapter 17, which is something worthy of exploration. Maybe we'll get there today, maybe not. That might be for next week. But what we see here is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the world was moving along, it was developing, and Hashem at some point said, stop. Now, there are many different interpretations of what that means that he said stop. The Hasidim say that the existence of the world itself, it's based on Kabbalistic sources, obviously, the world itself can only exist as a result of what's called the Tsingtsum of Hashem. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, who is infinite, is the Ein Sof, he contracted himself to enable a world to exist separate and distinct from Hashem. What's the problem of Avodah Zarah? The collapsing of everything into being somehow related to God to such an extent that you could worship it because it is Hashem. That to us is idolatry, the form of idolatry that is usually called pantheism, if it's the parts of nature, but it would be called totemism if it's a relationship to an object. The object's holiness is such that I will worship it because it represents God. Oh, that's Avodah Zarah. And pantheism is the sun, moon, and stars, etc. Hence the expression Avodat Kochavim Umazalot, and the other expression of Avodah Zarah. They're of the same family. They're really the same thing from a halachic vantage point, but that's the notion. So say the Hasidim, when Hashem made the world, there had to be a distinction between the creator and the created. So Tsingtsum means that Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kiviyachol, as it were, also symbolic language, contracts himself to allow a world to exist that is not collapsed into Hashem. but is separate. There's a Bore, and then there's a Nivra. There's a Bore, and then there's an Olam. The Bore Olam created the world, but he is not the world. Now, these are mystical ideas, but what's the point you can take away from it? The idea that as the world that Hashem created and set in motion seemed more and more to be getting more and more distant from Hashem, if you will, or to say it differently, Hashem's presence was more and more hidden within the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu at some point said to the world, stop. I need there to be some kind of balance between the world of Gashmiyut, of physicality, and the world of Ruchniut, of spirituality, to permit the capability that there will be creatures who will be able to have a relationship with me, to be able to tease out, to mine the world such as it is, to appreciate my presence within it. Now that's more of a Hasidish idea. I say that first because that warms the kishkas, if you will. At least for me it does. To think about what that means. There's a certain balance in the world between the Gashmi and the Ruchani, the physical and the spiritual, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the world at some point, and the Hasidim, by the way, it's very beautiful etymologically, the word olam is milashon ha'elem. The word for world is itself about something that's hidden, something concealed. And many of the Hasidim, Chedush Yarim writes to this, Fasamis, right, that the presence of Hashem is hidden within the physical world. Okay, hidden, but not so hidden. Sha'amar le'olamot die. Enough, stop. Now there's another idea, and this is more maybe of a, of an idea having to do with the world of the development, Yeshomrim, the evolution of the world. I believe in evolution. Kadosh Baruch Hu guides everything in the world. He guided this thing called evolution. He made up the rules of nature. He decided that this is how it's going to be, and then he guided it. That's Hashgacha of Hashem. So there was a certain sequence of how things went. The Malbim essentially goes in that direction. If Kadosh Baruch Hu would have left things as they were, the plant coming out of the ground that is called wheat would have kept developing, and if it would have kept evolving on its own, eventually it would have become bread. Hashem said, stop the process here. I want to leave the rest for the human beings to deal with. Says the Malbim, and of course Avram Avinu, we know, but Avram Avinu doesn't yet know what Hashem's going to tell him. But this is where Hashem is giving Avram Avinu a mission in the world. If the story of Brit ben Abitarim had already happened, and only Brit ben Abitarim, you can go back and look at chapter 15, and the contrast is important to see. In chapter 15, there is a historical process that's unfolding. And there is actually almost nothing that Avram Avinu needs to do, except in the moment of the covenant, the Brit ben Abitarim. If you look carefully, this is what's going to happen to you, Avram Avinu. Oh, he didn't say Avram Avinu. This is what's going to happen to you, Avraham. Right? He told him, go out and count the stars at the beginning of it. Okay, that's not really part of the Brit per se. The Brit starts in chapter 15, verse 7. So I took you out from there, and from Ur Kasdim, to give you this land as an inheritance. So Avram Avinu asks him a question, how will I know? So Hashem tells him, take all these animals, split them in half. The fire will go, the column of fire will walk through it, so to speak. Avram Avinu, you will walk through it. And here's what's going to happen. Yadoa Teda, here's what you know what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen to you. You're not even going to live to see the end of what's going to happen. But this is what happened to your progeny. 400 years hence, they'll come back. Wait a second. What does Avram Avinu have to do for that covenant? In the moment, is to take the animals, split them, leave them, walk through them. Good, done. After that, Hashem tells Avram Avinu, here's our Brit. You will see through the events of history that I am with you. And some of those events will be terrible, terrible events. 400 years of slavery. Of course, Mas Avot Simon Labanim, a cycle that has repeated many times. In chapter 17, how does the covenant begin? Hashem says to Avram Avinu, step 1, as I am also Hashem, who is Kel Shakai, I am the one who said to the world, stop, and now the rest has to be discovered, or, as the Hasidim might have said, or as the Malbim and others write, you have to finish the work. That's the other aspect of me. I, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, have contracted myself, kiviyachol. I said to the world, stop, so now there's work for you to do. And the first thing in chapter 17 we should note about Brit Mila is, it is a mission for Avram Avinu of what he needs to do. Now, you might think that means You might think that means he's got to do it one time. But of course, as we know, unlike Brit Ben Abitarim, which was one moment in history, we will see now, Brit Mila is every time a new baby boy is born, they are entered into the covenant. The covenant has two sides. What we do, and then what Hashem will do. But what we do is not just the Brit Milah, but the Brit Milah as trajectory in terms of a sense of mission. But let's keep going. We'll see it filled out just on the level of Pshat. But you see right from that first initial pasuk, Vayira Hashem al Avram Vayomer Elav Ani Kel Shakai Hitalech Lefanai Vayetamim. Walk before me and be whole. Go before me. Now, one of the interpretations of Hitalech Lefanai is, as I said before, Rashi just says, cleave to me. The Malbim has it as, Hitalech Lefanai, you are now my partner in Chumash Breisheet. Complete it and fix everything. What's the first thing? Is to be tamim. In order for you to perform this role in the world, you need to be tamim. What is that tamim? Tmimut. Sometimes it's adding, sometimes it's even subtracting, i.e. in the case of Brit Milah itself. So now Hashem keeps talking. I will keep my covenant between us. I will make you multitudinous. The Avram's reaction right away, Vayipol Avram al panav vaydaber ito Elokim lemor. Now, why did Avram fall down here and not before? Hold that thought. We're going to come back to it in a minute, but just want to keep reading a little bit more. Ani hine vriti itach v'hayita la'av hamon goyim v'leikarei od et shimcha Avram v'ya shimcha Avram ki av hamon goyim l'taticha. The covenant is you will be a father to many nations, not just your nation. But Shelley, I see your question. I'll come back in 2 minutes, like I said. But right, I'm father to many nations, and not just one nation. And your name is no longer Avram, but now Avraham. Somehow adding the letter Hey has transformed the identity of Avram into Avraham. I'm going to keep reading because I want to see a little more. I will make you like pru or vu, procreative, fruitful, many, many children. I'll give you to many nations, and there will be kings that will emanate from you. I will keep the covenant between me and you, between your progeny after you, for all generations as an everlasting covenant to be for you a God and for your progeny after you. If I stopped right here, and we didn't read any more psukim, you could have said, Brit Ben Abitarim was a national covenant. The national covenant was, you're here now, you're going to get this land. Before you get this land, you will be exiled for a long period of time, and then you will return after that. And when you return, you will get this land again. National. If I only read until here in Brit Milah, I would have said, this is the quote-unquote religious covenant. Because the religious covenant here is not about land, it's about people, wherever they may be. Brit Ben Abitarim is the one, and Brit Milah is the other. Two covenants, one national, one religious. If I had stopped here. And you see that is obviously the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu started. And by the way, the covenant of Brit Ben Abitarim is about the Jewish nation, the progeny of Avram Avinu, going and coming back and inheriting a particular tract of land. The covenant of Brit Milah is, at this point, a universal covenant, by which I mean Hashem is telling Avram Avinu, you'll be the father of many different nations. Many, many different religions, if you will. I mean, all Abrahamic in nature. Would that they had not strayed and gone off into making actually other religions. But I mean, in the sense of many peoples will say the descendant of Abraham, of Avram Avinu, Ibrahim. They'll all make the same claim. And it's right here in the Torah. And by the way, it's a covenant where what do I expect of you is told to Avram Avinu right up front. Hitalech lefanai v'yetamim. Right? You'll be a father to many nations. What's the point of telling you the father of many nations? You should be happy he's going to have a lot of kids. It means the influence of an Avram Avinu, was pointed out. I think it's Rav Eliel Lopian who pointed out, I think it was him, who said that Avram Avinu built no buildings, left no monuments, wrote no open books. He did write the Sefer Yetzirah. And yet, Avram Avinu, as a seminal figure in world history, had such an unbelievable influence on all of Western civilization, Adi Yom Hazeh. And you think about, again, quote unquote, the Abrahamic faiths. This is the idea. Now, the covenant of the Brit Milah doesn't end there. It just starts there. Now look at Perek Chet, Pasuk Chet rather, chapter 17, verse 8. I'm coming back. I didn't forget you, Shah. I'm coming back. Let's hold on a minute. And Elliot. Hi. Shalom Avracha. Elliot Kahan, Eretz Yisrael. I don't know why. I didn't even notice that you're here. Hello. Excellent.
Hello. How are you? Good to see you.
Eretz Yisrael, Mamash. Shivat is there, Alon Mored. Wow. Nice to see you. Okay, let's go.
Miss you guys.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Limit Torah. Connecting us with Eretz Yisrael. Beautiful. Okay, so this is Elliot's live on location, probably where this happens. And this is the vicinity. V'natati lecha u'lezaracha acharecha et eretz migurecha et kol eretz Canaan lachuzat olam v'ayiti lahem leluhim. Now, I'm going to give to you and to your progeny after you this land where you dwell, this place. I'm giving you Eretz Canaan as an everlasting place that you hold. That is for you. An achuzat olam is more than just a kinyan, but it's an achuzah, means it's for all time. And I will be to you as a God. Now here, Eretz Yisrael is, as we learn here, a fundamental part of this Brit, a crucial part of the Brit. However, it is not just because of historical processes that Hashem says this is what's going to be. It's how it's going to flow out this way. Rather, it was Brit Ben Abitarim. You want to know? Here's what's going to happen. In this one, here's what you have to do. And here's how the covenant needs to go. And I will give to your progeny after you. Now, what's interesting here is, and we'll see it shortly in this same parak, that the definition of being a father has a broad application, but the definition of the word zera is a much more limited application. Meaning, Avraham could be the father to many nations, but in terms of who will be called his zera, meaning the progeny, the actual seed that becomes the family tree that will be receiving this land, that is not referencing his role as the Av Hamon Goyim, but rather as an Abba, a father to one zera, right? We'll see that. He's going to clarify that coming up. But here, and we'll see that also with Brit Milah now. The point here is that whereas the Brit Ben Abitarim was a national covenant, if you will, in which you don't have to do anything. It's just going to happen. You want to know what's going to happen? When you see it unfolding, you'll realize, this is the fulfillment of the covenant that Hashem said, and this is how it's going. In Brit Milah, here's what you have to do. By the way, the words Brit and Milah have not even come up yet. Did you notice? So far, this is the Brit, Hashem and Avram Avinu, B'Shem Kel Shakai, where Hashem's saying, I'm taking, so to speak, I'm taking a step back, so to speak. I'm telling you, you walk ahead of me, right? Now, the idea of this section, Pasuk Chet, is Hashem telling Avram Avinu, by the way, not just a sidebar, but this land is the living in this land, the connection to this land. I don't mean Chicago, I mean where Elliot's sitting. In Eretz Yisrael, that's actually where I will be for you a God. Now, this is a staggering thing. I'm fighting against myself. Mom is fighting against myself. I know that I am, but all right. Look at Rashi. If you have Rashi in front of you, on the words La'achuzat Olam, Pasuk Chet. I'm playing against myself, friends, but I will say in my paltry defense, Rashi played against himself. Rashi lived was born in Troyes, France. He learned in Worms in Germany. When he finished there, he went back to France. There was no chance he was getting to Eretz Yisrael. It wasn't going to happen for him. Many of his descendants did go, from the Beis Medrash to the Baalei Tosfot. He didn't go. Lachuzat olam, v'sham eyeh lachem le'elokim. There I will be for you a God. Aval ben Yisrael hadar b'chutz la'aretz, domeh k'mi she'ein lo Eloah. But a person, a Jew, who lives outside of Israel, it's like they don't have a God. How did Rashi write something that so obviously was playing against himself. So one could argue and explain, Rashi said that because Rashi had no option to go. Yeah, choliot. I'm not sure I have much better of an answer, but you see it. That's what Rashi writes. By the way, Rashi didn't make it up. Rashi took it from the Gemara. The Gemara says this. Now, what's the point? So I'm saying to Avram Avinu, it's not just that I'm making a covenant with you and it's like you have to go out in the world and represent me. This is your base of operations. When the people are going to be on the land of Eretz Canaan, the world will be able to appreciate, this is the base of operations of the representatives, the plenipotentiaries of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. And therefore, Pasuk Tet, Vayomer Elokim al Avram is a new statement. Here's phase 2. Vayomer Elokim al Avraham, Ve'ata briti tishmor ata v'zaracha acharecha ledorotam. Now, and you're going to have to keep your side of the bargain. So statement 1 is here's the mission of what you need to do, generally. Statement 2, here's what Hashem says, I will do for you. I will make you a father of many nations. It means you'll have great influence. And in a related story, I will keep your covenant, the covenant, for all generations will be everlasting with your progeny, bein zaracha acharecha. And for you and also for your progeny after, the Zera. It's not all of the people who are under the umbrella of the Av, but it is the Zera. And your Zera will also get a particular land. That particular land is this, Eretz Canaan. It'll be Achuzat Olam. And I will be for them a God. The relationship will be ongoing with the connection to Eretz Yisrael. Phase 1, finished. Now here's what you're going to have to do to whatever the word is. It's not it's reaffirm, really. It's not restart. It's reaffirm and to sign on to the covenant each time. It's every generation needs to do that. You and your progeny after you for all generations. And here is the mitzvah. This is the covenant you have to keep. There should be a Brit Mila for every male child. Done. The Mila should be of the flesh of the foreskin, and it should be a sign of a covenant between me and you. And then he gives them the details. Now notice, it should also include in Avram Avinu's case, in his lifetime, anyone else is in the household. Everyone else is under Avram Avinu's influence, who is not actually his progeny. We learned that Zerah has to literally be his progeny. This is the everlasting covenant. On your side is the Brit. As we say in Birkat Hamazon. It's right here. And a male who does not have the Brit Milah, so that individual is cut off from the Jewish nation. They have karet. Why? Because it's the sign of the covenant. It's carried by every Jewish man. That's the idea of it. And the idea of it as part of the beginning of signaling Hitalech lefanai v'yeh tamim. Ani kel shakai, so walk before me means you're my plenipotentiary. But here's what you need to do in order to signal that you're prepared to do that. It's the Brit Milah. Now, this is all phase 1. I know this week I'm doing much more skira than not. So phase 2, of course, is you think, Avraham, that I keep talking to you, so the covenant's with you? Not exactly. I mean, yes, but without Sarah, there's no covenant over here. In other words, Hagar's already in the picture. He already has a son named Ishmael. Hashem now told him he's going to bear a Brit, and he sees this boy, tons of energy, tons of he's got passion, right? After all, the Malach did say, Para Adam, be a wild man, hand on everything, his hand on everyone. By the way, generally when we say that pasuk, when I say that pasuk, I feel there's a pejorative, there's like his hand's going to be on everybody, everybody's hand's going to be on him. But when the Malach said it, among the Mefarshei Mikra, there are many who maintain it was much more positively formulated. He'll influence everyone. Everyone influence him. Now we look back and we say, Para Adam, yeah. But in Avram Avinu's mind, there really is a serious question. Well, now we have this whole arrangement with Hagar, and okay, I guess the beautiful energy of my wonderful son Yishmael, who had, of course, Malachim involved in his birth also. Remember, the Malach with Hagar must be with him. That's my Zerah. It's my physical child. And the next section of this parak, which we may not get to today, there's only 7 minutes left over here, is about focusing on the fact that without the covenantal mother, without Sarah Imenu, there really isn't a Brit. It's not going to work. It's going to happen. The Kedushat Yisrael, the Zerah, will actually be through her. That's going to be the second half. And that's where Avram learns that when Hashem kept saying Zerah, that's the famous line, Ki b'Yitzchak yikar lecha Zara. It's through Yitzchak that you will be called. That will be called your chosen progeny. You go through there. He already has a son Yishmael. Yes. He'll also. Avram Avinu says, well, what about him? He's not part of the story. Not also one of my descendants. Also, but not the Zerah. Not in that way. Not in terms of the covenant. Yeah. Let's dial back for a couple of pieces because I don't think we're going to get to see that second half. But I just want to give you sort of coming attractions. The Brit Mila is physically on Avram Avinu and on the Jewish males, but the women are from Sarah Imenu and onward. It's right here, black on white, in this section, that in order to understand the Brit, and that the Brit, the covenant itself, is with the Zerah of Avram Avinu, Ki b'Yitzchak yikar lecha Zara, it's going to be from Sarah Imenu. Davka, that's being highlighted right here in the second half of Perek Yud Zayin. Now, a few things. What does it mean about that he'll be tamim? That he'll be tamim, to be perfect, seems very strange. Again, every translation is an interpretation. That's all it is. That's why Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael resisted all of the seductive invitations to translate the Torah into other languages and forget about the original, the Lashon HaKodesh. If you look at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, already, Ho'il Moshe Be'er Torah Zot Le'mor, Sefer Dvarim, Rashi there based on Chazal, that Moshe was translating the Torah into 70 languages to show that the Torah can exist in each and every culture. And nonetheless, go back to the original source material, if you will. I was anchored in Lashon HaKodesh. V'heyei tamim, be complete, be whole. I see Elliot wrote here that Safari used the word blameless. Well, what does that mean? What kind of an aspiration is it to be perfect, right? So if you're perfecting yourself, you could say it that way. Blameless, is that without sin, right? So there's really a big discussion, obviously, on what the words themselves mean. Rashi is always my starting point, right? Heyei tamim avzeh tzivui achar tzivui heyei shalem b'chol nisyonotai means walk before me, and I'm telling you that you need to be whole with me, complete in all of the tests that will come in the future. There will be other things that will happen, other challenges, and be complete in your relationship to me. And to balance, walk before me means the Medrash uses the language, you are walking, it's like Avraham walked ahead of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as opposed to Noach, et ha'elokim italech Noach. God, Noach walked with God, but God told Avraham, you walk ahead of me, meaning you're my representative. At the same time, Heyei Tamim means that means take your hand off the controls, be complete with me in all the tests that I will send your way. The one at Lech Lefanai is the active, Heyei Tamim is, in a certain way, the passive. It's the level of pshat. The two they're not canceling, they're balancing each other. Walk ahead, serve me, and be complete with all the tests that I will give you. Now, Lefimi Drashot Lech Lefanai means walk before me the mitzvah of Brit Mila. And through the mitzvah of Brit Mila, and here's where the translation comes about being perfect, is Tiyeh Tamim, you'll be complete, right? Because now, as long as you have the orla, the foreskin attached to you, you have some kind of a blemish. How will you perfect yourself, make yourself perfect? That's the Brit Milah that's coming. That's one interpretation of Rashi on the midrashic level. The second interpretation of Rashi, which is Davar Acher, V'heyei Tamim, you'll be complete. Now you are missing 5 of your organs are not complete. They haven't been sanctified. Your 2 eyes, your 2 ears, and your sexual organ. I will give you an extra letter in your name. And now, when I give you the extra letter in your name, all of the organs of your body will be perfected. What does that mean? So we have a tradition that there are a grand total of 248 organs in the body. This tradition comes to us in Mishnah Masachet Olot, in the first chapter. It tells us, Mishnah Zayin and Chet, the number of organs in the human body. So you'll tell me, well, Rabbi, let's look up, Gray's Anatomy or whatever they use today, and we'll see what the real number is scientifically. So it just depends how you divide up, so to speak, what constitutes organ systems and the like. The tradition number is 248. Avram Avinu needed he needed a 5 added to his name. On the symbolic level, we understand that there are different ways of expressing language and meaning. One is through words, another one is through numbers. Numbers have meaning, significance. Sometimes they represent something to us. They remind us of something. It so happens the name Avram is Gematria, is in the numerological value 243. When you add the letter Hey, it goes up to 248. Now, okay, Mali this, Mali that, numbers. We also have a tradition that there are a total of 613 mitzvot, of which 365 are prohibitions and 248 are positive commandments. Rashi here explains that right now 5 of your organs, according to some of the commentators on Rashi, it means that these are the 5: eyes, ears, and genitalia with which you can sin, that cause you to sin, and then you sin. These need to be elevated. How will I elevate them for you? I'll give you a letter Hey in your name. The gematria of the name Avraham is 248. Representing, Avram Avinu represented, that's what the Gemara means, Masechet Yuma as well, in Daf Chav Chet. Avram Avinu kept the whole Torah, he observed all the positive mitzvahs, 248 mitzvahs he observed. The point is that through himself, his personhood, what he represented, where he went, what he did, Hashem says, you're walking before me, be complete, be whole. What is that wholeness? When I add the letter to your name, that's what will give you the wholeness, because you're going to represent the 248 mitzvahs of the Torah. You represent the 248 organs of the body by elevating them. Therefore, the Brit Mila is dafka in terms of the sexual organ, right? As a very important aspect of human interaction and a point of distinction of Klal Yisrael vis-a-vis the rest of society. Why is there a davar acher? What Rashi have to quote 2 different things? One is ve'yeh tamim, you'll be perfect through the act of Brit Milah. The other one is through the adding of 5 letters to your name. Aren't they the 2 of them connected? They certainly are. But the question is, what does ve'yeh tamim mean? In the first interpretation, ve'yeh tamim is physically. You are what's called a bal mum. You have some kind of a blemish in the fact that you haven't done the Brit Milah, and I'm teaching you, says Hashem to Avram Avinu, how to fix that. In the second role, it's the spiritual character of Avram Avinu that's going to become tamim. Now, the Brit Milah is going to be part of how he gets there, but the spiritual character of Avram, what he'll come to represent of necessity, needs to have an extra letter Hey. As Chazal explain it, Rashi himself says it, 2 psukim later, when Hashem says, I'm adding your name, Pasuk Daled, Pasuk Hey, he actually is telling the Av Hamon Goyim. Rashi writes in Pasuk Hey, it is an acronym also of his name. Avram was the Av of Aram. He was a father figure in Aram, an Aramean that he was. He lived in Haran, came from the area of Mesopotamia, but he might have actually been from that area, Kuta, etc. He had a great influence on the people there. Not all the people, but many of the people. He was a father to Aram. Now he is Avraham, Av Hamon Goyim. So an expansion of that was left. The Reish was left there as a vestige of what he was, the Avram. But now he's Avraham, the idea that he now represents something to all of humanity, Avram, to many, many nations within the world. This idea, for the question is, when God said to Avram, be tamim, be whole before me, did he mean by doing the act of Brit Milah? Or did he mean in terms of expanding his role to represent so much to so many nations? The answer, of course, is it's both of these things. Yes? Both are required. Rashi gives us both dimensions. The truth is each one of them has a bit of a weakness. Ve'yeh tamim, be perfect. By taking something away, you're going to be perfect. Usually by adding something, you're going to add perfection. So the second interpretation, adding a letter hey to his name, that's value added to create perfection. The first one is the removal of something. Conversely, flip side, the weakness with adding 5 letters to his name, I'm not any more perfect because someone added letters to my name, but if I do an action, I'm doing something active to try to perfect something. Sometimes active perfection is actually the removal of something extraneous. So each of the interpretations of Rashi, whenever Rashi says davar acher, we also have to ask, why did he give us 2 things from a whole catalog of 25 things he could have chosen from the Medrash, from the Gemara, from Chazal? He chose these 2 and he anchored it with davar acher. So the methodological point is to try to see that each one side of the equation has something a little bit weak that the other side compensates for. And the 2 are therefore coming to answer variant dimensions of the question that was brought up by the way the words come about in the Torah itself. So to sum up, what we've seen today is this covenant, called the covenant of Brit Mila, incorporates not just the universal dimension of being an Av Hamon Goyim, but especially also, which is, by the way, found in that letter Hey that Avram Avinu gets, and it's his persona, etc., what he's going to do for the world, but also the Brit Mila, the act of Brit Mila, cements the covenant on our side of the deal, so to speak, of the covenant. And that covenant is between Hashem and the Zera of Avram Avinu, which we learn, not today, but you can scan ahead, you can see it. Kibi Yitzchak Karl Chazara. Dafka, the point is, through Yitzchak, that's going to be your Zera, even if you will be a father to many nations. And not as a sidebar, but as a mainstay of this covenant, the covenant of Brit Milah is also intrinsically bound up with Eretz Yisrael. But whereas the covenant of Brit Ben Abitarim is its theater of operations, its history, it's going to play out this way. There'll be a coming and going, a galut and a geula, etc. We're living through through both, if you will. But according to many, obviously the galut aspect is receding, and the geula aspect is of course ascendant. Should continue in that direction. Right? But this covenant of Brit Milah is, listen, wherever you're going to end up, you should know you still have a connection to me through the Brit Milah, and your connection is still to Eretz Yisrael. And the sense of feeling, and this is going to be my theme on Tisha B'Av, of feeling a real sense of displacement when one comes to this period of time, that we're here, wherever the here is geographically, but we're always connected and tethered to Eretz HaKodesh, to Eretz Yisrael, and that is a crucial dimension of the covenant between Hashem and Avram Avinu, and we as the children of Avram Avinu and Sarah Imenu, carrying that tradition on, not without its challenges, but we do so nonetheless with a great sense of pride, a great sense of privilege and honor that we have this opportunity. Ashrenu matavchokenu u'manayim goraleinu u'mayafa yerushaseinu Eretz Yisrael. Ad Kan for today, everybody. I wish you all the best. Mashiach Tzidkenu does not arrive, God forbid, before Tisha B'Av. And we will have to have a Tisha B'Av on Wednesday night and Thursday. And Einenu L'Tzion. Our eyes should be focused on Eretz HaKodesh and on, of course, the Tzion within Tzion, of the Ir Tzion of Yerushalayim. And we should be Zocha that if we have to have Tisha B'Av, should be already the last Tisha B'Av. We should be Zocha to the Biat Gold Tzedek and Her B'Meinu.